What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Fight Network's Downtown Studios. I am John Ramdeen alongside Cody Saftik. UFC on Fox 23 went down this past Saturday night in Denver, Colorado. The main event, a women's 135-pound matchup. Valentina Shevchenko got the job done despite the fact that Juliana Pena had the formula. She had the recipe. I think she was underestimating Shevchenko's jiu-jitsu game. She looked good up against the cage. When she got the fight down to the ground, she looked good. Just a mental slip, and Shevchenko took advantage and locked up the arm lock.
Yeah, she looked ultra competitive right from the get-go, and I think really going into the fight, it seemed like her and her team may have been overlooking Shevchenko in the slightest bit. They were overlooking altitude. They spoke about the fact that, we're not worried about it. We know what our fighter can do. And when she went out there, she didn't give that respect, and like you said, maybe that was the formula. She was having a lot of success early, pinning her up against the cage, working the knees to the midsection. Even when she got taken down throwing the knees, she gets back up, she goes back to throwing the knees right away, and yes, it does get her taken down again, but she had a game plan, she stuck to it, and she was doing good in the early beginnings. But Shevchenko, such a well-rounded mixed martial artist. For everybody that was talking about just the striking, and I think a lot of people were only talking about the striking, they got a rude awakening, and Peña was one of those people.
Well, Shevchenko, we saw how good she looks at distance. She was able to score there, and we knew that Peña had to get through that distance to get close, and she had a couple of options. Try to put the fight down to the ground, which we saw her try to do. That didn't work. Let's go to game plan 2, up against the cage. And as you pointed out, doing great work with the knees, but people forget about Shevchenko's judo background. She took advantage of it, managed to get Peña to the ground. Peña, I love the idea of the fact that she was not broken in that fight, quickly made her way back up to her feet. I'm just surprised how much success that she had with Shevchenko, but you have to credit Shevchenko in the sense that she was never rattled. Even though that Peña was having all that success in the grappling department, the control department, that Shevchenko, it's always about the long play with her, that she has the idea, eventually I'll find my spot. And did Peña get too comfortable? Was she on the ground thinking to herself, I'm going to win? Over the course of 5 rounds, I have the formula. We're just going to stick with this. I'm not in any danger. Then a mental lapse, and Shevchenko took advantage.
I think most people at home watching or spectating the fight were thinking the same thing. I know a lot of people were saying in the room, well, 1-1 going into the third. It's like, well, there's still 40 seconds left in the second round. I mean, anything could happen. And when anything could happen, it's throwing up that armbar. And even when she got it, did the expression with Brian Stan saying, oh my God, she tapped. People were surprised. They weren't expecting that. So I think in a lot of ways, maybe she was getting comfortable in that position. But with Shevchenko, people said, well, she was getting pinned against the cage. She wasn't really doing good in that area. She knew going in, I have 5 rounds to work with. She knew going in it was going to be at altitude. And she knew going in that she had to pace herself. So I think in many ways, she waited for those spots. She waited for the proper time to get the takedown. She decided to hold her down to route out that first round and had really good spots throughout the fight, so to speak. But I think she was pacing herself. So even though Peña had a lot of moments, I think that was all part of Shevchenko's plan, and ultimately he did pay off with that submission victory.
And that's the experience. You have 80 some odd fights, mixed martial arts and Thai boxing. You know what to expect. And we saw that in the fight with Amanda Nunes. Amanda Nunes started out strong when she fought Shevchenko, and what happened? She faded, and then Shevchenko came on later on in their fight. And again, there's people speculating that what happens if that was a 5-round fight? Would Shevchenko come on later in round 3, 4, and 5 and take advantage of a tiring Nunes? But we didn't even get to that point in this fight with Juliana Peña because Shevchenko proving that she's just so dangerous everywhere.
Yeah, and this is fun now because now you get to bring out Amanda Nunes and she gets to square off with Valentina Shevchenko. You start building up some hype. People obviously want to see this rematch, and right away you're building something. And for Peña, this is not a bad thing. She's still young, she's still developing, and she'll be back. She had promising points, and maybe she's not a title challenger right now, but I think she's someone that can still challenge for a title down the road. Meanwhile, you definitely do the Shevchenko versus Amanda Nunes rematch. I think it's, maybe not big business pay-per-view wise, but this is the fight to make. This is a building division. These are 2 girls that are stars in the division. I think it makes complete sense, so book it right away.
Right now, 135 pounds, going through some changes. The former champion, Ronda Rousey, is she going to return to mixed martial arts? The former champion, Miesha Tate, announcing her retirement from the game. The former champion, Holly Holm, deciding to move up to 145 pounds. So right now, the division is open. Is it a foregone conclusion? Is Valentina Shevchenko the next one to get a crack at Amanda Nunes? And if she does, will it be on pay-per-view, or will the UFC do what they just did? You have the number 1 challenger at 135 pounds fighting on network television. Why don't you showcase Amanda Nunes and Valentina Shevchenko to the masses, also on network television?
I think you definitely put it on pay-per-view. Amanda Nunes is coming off headlining what was a million buy pay-per-view. People definitely bought that.
But it was Ronda Rousey.
It doesn't matter, but people still saw it. And when they saw that destruction, they were like, wow, Ronda Rousey, who I thought was invincible, is now lost to Amanda Nunes. Amanda Nunes stole that star power. And to anybody that doesn't believe that, when Holly Holm beat Ronda Rousey, she went out and fought Valentina Shevchenko 2 fights later in Chicago, and it was a very sold event because Holly Holm did the same thing. She stole that star power. I think you definitely put that fight on pay-per-view. And when you're talking about other challengers in the division, it's interesting to note since they've opened up 145 pounds, a lot of those challengers, such as a Holly Holm, have now left the division. Maybe not forever, but certainly for the time being. So Valentina really is the only game in town when you're going to look at the rankings.
Yeah, and I mean, for Juliana Pena and the rest of the 135-pound class, 1 or 2 victories, and you would have to imagine you will get your crack at a UFC championship. UFC on Fox 23 went down this past weekend in Denver, Colorado.